Thank you so much. Thank you, Mapilo. Thank you, Stephen, for those awfully generous words. And I truly appreciate the work that you have been doing, both of you, in continuing the Yale Adventist Campus ministry and fellowships mission and commitment to really making Yale an inclusive space and a more diverse environment. And thank you for continuing the work of Yale Adventist Campus Fellowship. And I also want to welcome all of you that are watching us online, wherever you may be, from all over the world. If you're on Eastern Standard Time, as we are, it's an afternoon panel, but it will be a very exciting afternoon panel. Today's panel, we will be discussing religion and prisons, religious liberty advocacy and chaplaincy work in prison systems. Our panelists, as Mapilo mentioned, they bring their diverse experiences and enrich our conversation in discussing ways in which religious literacy can help with religious liberty in prisons. We will also engage with the role that religious institutions and religious caregivers play in criminal justice reform and what they can do to ease the plight of mass incarceration. Religion plays a crucial role in criminal justice reform. According to Beth R. Crisp, in her book chapter, Religious Literacy and Social Work, The View from Australia, in the book, Religious Literacy and Policy and Practice on page 216, I quote, "It was the Salvation Army which established the first bureau open to all unemployed Australians, as well as the world's first program for released prisoners." Our panelists today will discuss the intersections of religion and criminal justice reform in law, religion, and public policy. Professor Bahia Muhammad is Assistant Professor of Criminology in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at Howard University. She received her BS in Administration of Justice from Rutgers University with a minor in psychology and a criminology certificate. Dr. Muhammad went on to receive her MS in criminal justice from John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Dr. Muhammad received her PhD from Rutgers University School of Criminal Justice, where she specialized in families and communities affected by mass incarceration. Her particular areas of expertise rest in the lived experiences of children of incarcerated parents. Welcome, Professor Bahia Muhammad, and thank you for being a part of our panel with us this afternoon. And Dr. Salahuddin Muhammad is a Muslim imam and also the former Muslim chaplain for the New York State Department of Correctional Services. Having worked in maximum, medium, and minimum security prisons, counties, jails, as well as a psychiatric center, Imam Muhammad has received his doctoral degree in Islamic Studies, Christian-Muslim Relations from Hartford Seminary, and a master's degree in Theology and Counseling from New York Theological Seminary, as well as a bachelor's degree in the social science from SUNY at New Paltz. He also received a graduate certificate in Islamic chaplaincy from Hartford Seminary. Welcome, Imam Salahuddin, and we look forward to your presentation as well. Professor James Sonne is professor of law at Stanford Law School and founding director of its Religious Liberty Clinic, the leading and till when this bio was written, the only full-time academic program. But I'm sure Professor Sonne can also tell us if there's more that have been established after that. And in this clinic, students can learn the practice and profession of law through supervised litigation in that field. Professor Sonne earned his BA with honors from Duke University and his JD with honors from Harvard Law School. He's published articles in numerous research journals, including the Harvard Law Review and the Oxford Journal of Church and State. Welcome, Professor James Sonne, and we're very glad to be here with you. And thank you all our panelists for being here with us. And we look forward to your presentations. And we will begin with Professor Bahia Muhammad.
Greetings. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. I'm very excited and energized to be with you all today. Yesterday was a phenomenal experience, as well as earlier this morning. And so I would like to thank you all for this invitation to be able to present on such an important topic, specifically in light of everything that we're dealing with around pandemic, social injustice, unrest, and the realities of the lived experiences, specifically of those individuals that are our faith leaders and our faith servants. Today, I would like to begin the conversation talking specifically about three dynamics of nuances that I came into play with in my work around the world dealing with incarcerated populations, and specifically centering the voices of incarcerated women, incarcerated juveniles, and their connections and programming within the facility to their families from a faith-based perspective. One of the things that I identified early on in doing work in this area was the need of services for incarcerated women. As we look at the statistics around the world, specifically in the United States of America, we see that the numbers of incarcerated women are increasing substantially. And although those numbers have not superseded the numbers of incarcerated men, women are entering carceral spaces faster and in larger numbers than that of our brothers that are incarcerated. When we think about programming inside of correctional facilities, we have yet to see the programming measure up. Many women, including those that are faith leaders and servants, are in need of specific services around their faiths inside of facilities. For example, many of the Muslim women who I engage with inside of the Department of Corrections, as well as the Bureau of Prisons across the nation, complained about their frustrations as it related to practicing their faith, not only in reading form, in the sense of being able to receive the scripture and the Quran, but also the lack of khimars and head wraps that are provided to incarcerated women. When individuals are not receiving the equipment that they need in order to practice their faith holistically, it reduces their iman, in other words, their faith. It doesn't give individuals an opportunity to practice holistically. We find that these nuances are the same across the faith base. Many individuals talk specifically about not being able to afford a Bible from the commissary. Oftentimes, the world has a misconception that when individuals are incarcerated, that they receive their faith knowledge base for free. Many of the individuals who I engage with had to decide between their oodles and noodles, or the food that they would be purchasing on their commissary, against the faith readings that they required and were in need of. In fact, many of the individuals that I spoke with across the last 7 years talked about a need for additional resources that go beyond the Bible or the Quran or the Torah. And so as we think about letting our people go and thinking about emancipation and liberation and freedom as it relates to faith, we must also think about building the minds of those individuals beyond what your traditional expectation will be. That will include not only the scriptures and those texts, but also supplementary readings that allow for individuals to find their faith, their religion, and their spirituality in mundane readings, as well as other readings that are not geared toward everyday life. When I think about all of the conversations that I've had across the span, many individuals whisper about their shortcomings inside of carceral spaces, especially as it relates to faith. There is this sense of shame when individuals have to ask for additional resources. Many of the professional staff at the correctional facility warned those individuals that are coming into carceral spaces that they should be wary of incarcerated individuals who ask for Bibles or Qurans, and that those are things that must be reported. And therefore, when individuals are reaching out for resources to be able to practice their faith holistically and strategically and through steadfastness, they are oftentimes punished. Although we understand that the motto of the Departments of Corrections across the United States of America is warranted by security and safety, we must also think about ways of being able to operationalize the abilities for outside organizations to be able to provide reading resources, as well as additional programming and practices for all individuals that are incarcerated. Many times when we think about religion, it is a component in carceral spaces that many of the world feel is under the realm, specifically meaning that there is no need for fixing or things to be uplifted. And I feel that that is a misunderstanding that many individuals have, that that's one area that we don't need to talk about and no areas that need improvement. When you think about incarcerated individuals, the population shifts. And as we think about those individuals that are incarcerated all across the United States of America, each individual has different needs. And so as we move forward, I challenge individuals to not think of an a la carte model or a cookie cutter model, but to think about ways that we can utilize innovation, creativity, and dreaming as a way to allow incarcerated individuals to have a similar experience that they would have in the community. This also brings me towards a lot of what I found to be true was that following incarceration, individuals were not accepted into the faith organization in the community. And although this is a hard and sombering conversation to have, it is one that is very important. We think about second chances for incarcerated individuals who have served their sentences. But oftentimes when they step on the foot of churches, imams, masjids, synagogues, and the like, we find that many individuals are not accepted into that population. Oftentimes, they are pushed away from engaging in relationships with individuals inside of those particular safety zones. And therefore, we have to challenge ourselves and think about that second standard. What is it that we believe about incarcerated individuals? What do our personal scriptures teach us in the immense stories about incarcerated prophets and scholars and significant individuals? And how can we use those scriptures as a means to levitate not only the conversation, but truly to be of service? One of the things that individuals fail to realize is that when we hold these stigmatizations in our minds, we are pushing out an entire faith-based community. When you think about the disproportionate numbers of Black and Brown and Indigenous individuals that are incarcerated, this also adds a layer of intersectionality. Not only are individuals seen as a warning because of the color of their skin, but also the duality of their faith and their religion. If they are able to practice in carceral spaces where they are praying, if they are Muslim, 5 times a day, practicing Ramadan and engaging in the strongest and highest iman that they've had in their lives, and then they enter the community and are turned away, what does that say to the Muslim Ummah? What does it say to the Christian community? What does it say to the world of religious believers if we do not accept our own to come into a tradition and a safe space to be able to continue to grow? These are stories that many individuals do not highlight. These are stories that often get pushed under the rug or the prayer rugs in different places of faith. Many individuals are shy about talking about the realities of how they erase the stories of the incarcerated individuals in their own homes. Today, I challenge imams, spiritual leaders, and individuals across the nation to incorporate mass incarceration into their khutbahs, into their speeches, into their engagement, and truly believe in the realm of social justice. Specific for me, being a Muslim scholar and a Black woman, I know that social justice is at the heart of Islam, as in many religions. And therefore, it is incumbent upon all of us to assure that these conversations are had, not just in private, but also in public. Many of the times when you go to carceral spaces, and I'm speaking specifically as it relates to Muslim populations, because that is what I'm able to speak to more through a lived experience, we find that the individuals that are the faith leaders on the inside come and go. There's not a lot of sustainability. We know that religion requires steadfastness, and specifically Islam, structure. That means that every time we have individuals that come to a carceral space and don't survive the entire year, it means that a faith base on the inside is now deconstructed and having to be built up from the ground. It becomes difficult when I speak to students and they say, I haven't been able to pray, or I haven't gone to the Kukbar, and I haven't had an opportunity to have Jumu'ah in 3 months because we lost our imam. It makes it very difficult also for individuals to navigate that framing. Many individuals are going into carceral spaces to be of service and end up becoming worn out, beat up, and burnt. And that is because in the community, I feel we don't put enough of our hands out to help individuals, to be able to provide those resources, to be able to bring programming in a way that we hold hands and not in a way that owns a facility. We should be able to share those spaces where different masjids and different faith organizations are able to go in and share that particular space. We should not use white supremacy as a framework to divide and to conquer. We should not be creating an avenue where one organization is allowed to enter and others are looked down upon. We need to begin to build the divide and allow individuals to see that there are 20 and 30 different offerings of faith leadership that they are able to choose from upon reentry. What I am saying to you all today is that it would be a true blessing to be able to bridge the divide and allow for all of the different faith organizations to enter carceral spaces in a way that gives individuals an introduction to what is available in the community. And that way we allow for the health of all individuals to be maintained. It is definitely a hard stone and pillar to carry, going into carceral spaces and dealing with the realities of the individuals that you have to make dua for, the ones that you have to pray for, the individuals that you carry home in your mind and in your heart and in your soul. And so do not take my speech to believe that this is an easy thing. It is difficult, but the ways that we are able to talk about it today will allow for us to come up with solutions. As I come toward the end of my presentation, I want to draw your attention to incarcerated juveniles and those individuals that are in detention facilities. Oftentimes, they are a second thought. They are a second thought. And when we think about the youngest among us, we don't give them the opportunity to make the selection of what they want to learn about as it relates to their faith base. Oftentimes we make the decision for them, depending on the organizations that are available and depending on the institutions that have volunteerism and are able to come and provide services. To everyone listening today and those that watch the video later on, be reminded that children should be heard and not only seen. And when we think about the ways that we engage the next generation, we must hold them to high standards. In Islam, it is believed that you should come to religion, not just because your parents have introduced you to it, alhamdulillah if they have, but you will be required to pray on your own. You will be required to abide by the rules and regulations of that religion as well as any other religion. And we should not wait for the youth in detention facilities to get 18 years of age or older before we begin to introduce them into religious belief and sound understanding. Many times the programs and the lack of that we see in adult facilities never finds its way on the juvenile side. Imagine allowing young individuals to make the decision of what they want to believe, how they want to believe, and how that can ultimately help them along their lifestyle. When we think about women and we think about juveniles, This is the populations of individuals that are often left off to the side. And so for today, I wanted to elevate and bring that into light. In closing, I would like to share a story about an incarcerated woman who was able to do programming through the Howard University Higher Education in Prison program, which allowed for her to engage with her detained son during the time of her incarceration. When we think about faith in the community, we see faith as a family initiative. We go to service together, we engage at home together, we pray foot to foot, toe to toe, and we kneel at the side of our beds together as one in unity. When individuals are incarcerated, we erase the phenomenon of family. Oftentimes you have individuals that are incarcerated and having conversations over the phone together and praying. Sometimes you send a scripture or a prayer through the writing in written form. And oftentimes at the end of a visit, prior to COVID, individuals could gather and hold hands or lift up both of their hands in duas and pray together for either a safe trip home or for the rest of the future. How about allowing opportunities where incarcerated individuals can practice and learn together, where we have services on Fridays, services on Sundays, and also on Saturdays, where the family is able to enter into that space, into the incarcerated chapel spaces to be engaging in conversation and love over faith. It will be an introduction into an opportunity that we don't see during incarceration, but is important. Oftentimes when we lose our way and we lose our faith and our iman starts to ebb and flow, it is oftentimes our families that come to our rescue and remind us of the scriptures, of the prayers, and of the du'as that we should make in order to increase our faith. This should not be omitted from those individuals that are incarcerated. And if we believe in letting our people go, that also means letting their minds be free to dream, to learn, and to pray. One of the instances that I had an opportunity to do in 2015 was to take students to live in a prison as part of my course curriculum. During that time, I allowed and was approved by the warden in West Virginia to be able to have the children of incarcerated parents come and sleep next to their mothers. The thing that I will never forget, and alhamdulillah, it was such a blessing to be able to have the incarcerated mothers pray next to their children for the first time in their lives. These women did not sleep for 48 hours. Their eyes were bloodshot red. They were able to read the Bible together. They were able to read the Quran together. They knelt together on the side of their cot and they loved one another through faith. That is the vision of freedom that I see. That is the liberation that I see. And I am prayerful that this dialogue today will lead us into a new, innovative, and creative opportunity to not only eradicate these systems of oppression, but also breathe life into the souls of individuals that God created, that none of us own, that deserve the right to have their minds liberated and set free. Peace and blessings, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Professor Bahir Muhammad. We really appreciate your presentation and the relevant observations that you have presented to us. And may we all in our religious communities take seriously your words of admonition. And now we will be transitioning to our second panelist, Professor and Imam Salahuddin Muhammad, and we look forward to his presentation.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So good to be with you all today. I thank you so much, Dr. Muhammad, for that presentation. Alhamdulillah, meaning the praise is all due to Allah, due to God. And for those who may not quite understand, we say Allah, but we are talking about the creator of the heavens and the earth, the same God as the Christians, the same God as the Jews, same God, said 7-day Adventist, same God, but we have a name that we call him, and that is Allah. But it's the same one, the creator of Adam and Eve and the universe and the galaxies and everything else. I'm so happy that I was invited to be a speaker at this conference because I've had the unique experience of being a chaplain for the Department of Corrections for almost 30 years. And I worked as a chaplain at the maximum, medium, and minimum security facility. And this is New York State. I don't know what's going on in all of the other states, but I can speak about what's going on in New York State. And I want to just go all the way back to the time that maybe some of you are familiar with and some may not be familiar with. It was in 1971. There was a rebellion in the correctional facility or in the prison, and they call it the Attica Rebellion. The Attica Rebellion. So many people lost their lives. It was a terrible situation. They actually had to send the guards in. They actually had to have the National Guard come in. The governor called them in. A lot of inmates were killed, etc. There were so many demands that the inmates were requesting because they threw them in the prison. As they say, you throw them in prison, you throw them in the prison and throw the key away. And that's pretty much the way it was. So when that happened, the governor at that particular time decided to set up a department that was called the Department of Ministerial and Family Services. And establishing that department, one of the commissioners, an assistant commissioner, his name was Reverend Earl B. Moore, who's since deceased. He was the person who put the program together, and he was responsible for making sure that the inmates or those who were incarcerated would be able to have religious services, to be able to have whatever their religion requires, if it was something that did not break the security. They also, what also happened, they opened up the chaplaincy because at one time you may have had some Protestants, but for sure you had Catholic chaplains. So now it was opened up, and now you had Muslim chaplains. You had chaplains for the Native American. You even had a chaplain for the Rastafarians. So we had chaplains to take care of the needs of those inmates who were in those facilities. As a chaplain coming in to work with the Islamic community inside, the inmates who are Muslim incarcerated, our immediate responsibility are those of our particular faith group. However, we were told that we are there for everyone, not only for the inmates, we're also there for the staff, we're there for everyone. So we would have all kinds of services for them. What I found in the time that I was there, that we were able to get materials for those people who were practicing certain religions. So the Muslims in that particular facility in New York State really didn't have a problem getting their materials because before chaplains came in, the inmates themselves used to take care of themselves. What happened is that some of them were really not doing the right thing, and so it caused a lot of problems. So now when they began to bring the chaplains in, the chaplain would come in as the imam and allow for the inmates to still have leadership, but under the chaplain. What they had is a program where they were able to sell oils. They call them the Muslim oils. And these oils that the Muslim was able to purchase, they were able to take that money and purchase books that they may have wanted for the Islamic community. They were able to sometimes even put more different types of meats, etc., into the menu for Ramadan, because during the month of Ramadan, they were able to fast and they were able to use that money for those things. That stayed the same. So the Muslim was able to do that. Most of what we got in terms of material, we had to pay for. There was a budget for all of the chaplains, and it would be divided amongst the different chaplains so that we can make sure that each area had the religious materials that they needed. What I found is in the Protestant chaplain, on the most part, or Catholic chaplain on the most part, they had programs outside that would allow for them to have Bibles. Just so many Bibles. A person, it may wanted a Bible, they could get one. They want 2 or 3 Bibles, they can get them. It came that easily. Before a Quran, we had to pay for it. We did find some organizations that offered free Qurans, and so we might get some, but it wasn't a lot. And what I found is that there may have been some problems because of the chaplain maybe just having it within their mind to just work with their particular faith group, which is not the reason why they were hired, to just be there for their faith group. But some of them did that in some of these institutions. So therefore, the Christian community was able to have all of the things that they wanted, but perhaps the Muslim community, be it the Nation of Islam or the al-Islam practiced by the Sunni Muslims or the Shia, etc., they may not have been able to get what they wanted. I have to say, though, that where I worked, and I was the base was at the Fishkill Correctional Facility that happened to be a medium security facility, the Catholic priest, the Reverend, Protestant Reverend, and myself, we had a really, really good relationship. We really worked together well in interfaith. We did some programs together, but we were there to help each other. So even though we were supposed to look out for our particular faith group, we looked out for everyone, because the idea is this: the people who are there because of whatever crime that they committed, or maybe they didn't commit a crime, but they're there. Many of them were broken and they needed to be mended or they needed to be healed. And so we, as the providers, the caregivers, were there to help them to come back together, to put them back together so that they can actually have their dignity and their honor and their self-respect, even though incarcerated. So we did our best to work with them. And I personally could remember that I would oftentimes speak to the inmates and let them know that they cannot allow for whatever crime that was committed to define who they are, because Almighty God, He created us all honorable and dignified. So because you made a mistake does not mean that should define who you are. You do your time, that's fine. But start healing, start mending yourself and recognizing that you made a mistake, but that's not who you are. And so that particular message would go out not only to the Muslims, but it would go out to everyone. So I can say to you that I had a lot of people coming to my door, and they came to my door because they knew that I would listen to them. And perhaps that's all they needed, was for someone to listen to them. And I had Muslims come, of course, but I had Catholics, Protestants, people who were atheists. It didn't matter, but they knew that this chaplain was going to listen to them. And if I was able to help them, then I would help them. In the Department of Corrections, they have so many roles, so many different people in terms of what they did. The only role within the Department of Corrections that had the advocacy element was the chaplain's role. Yes. So the chaplain, whether it's Muslim chaplain, Protestant chaplain, Catholic chaplain, Jewish chaplain, we were the ones that could advocate for the inmates. We could advocate for those who could not speak for themselves. That was the role that we had, which of course made the institution a little nervous, and they didn't particularly like that. But the idea is this: if the person is there to do their time, why should they have to be put in a jail inside a jail? Why should a person come in, and I'm talking about correction officers now, come in and mess with inmates for recreation and lock them up for little frivolous things? Why? So I would advocate for those inmates because they needed that. And so, of course, having that position may put you at odds with the administration sometime. But if you are a man or a woman of truth, you have to stand for the truth. And if at times it's necessary to speak truth to power, then that's what you do. So as a chaplain, I would stand up for a person to have the right to have their services, even if that person wasn't a Muslim. I had Santeria people coming to me about having their services. Devil worship. But that's what they believed, and they had a right to it. And so I would have to stand there and say, this person has a right to his services. They have at least 3 or 4 people. They should be able to have their service. And that's what the law says. They should get that. And I didn't have to agree with what they believed in, but they had a right to that. And so we would advocate for them as well. For the atheist, we'd advocate for him. One of the things that chaplains would do is when someone in the family died, we were the ones that the inmates would be called to so that we can tell them about the death in their family, comfort them, and hopefully put them together with their family by giving them a telephone call so they can talk to their family, and then working on getting them out to go to the funeral or the wake or something like that. So that's part of what the Muslim, or rather all chaplains would do. And because of the way we had it set up in our facility, if I was on call for this particular week, it didn't matter whether it was a Jew, a Christian, a Muslim, atheist, it didn't matter. I had that particular person and I was there to help that person. Religion in corrections is absolutely important because our books, whether we're talking about the Bible or the Quran, are books that speak to the development and the growth of the human being and how that human being should live his or her life. So it's absolutely important, not taken away from anything else, because education is important. When we talk about religion, we can't talk about religion and not talk about education, because there's education. A person is being educated within their religion. Many of the people that I know that I had contact with in terms of helping them, we were able to help them inside to come into a positive self-concept, a positive mental attitude. Individuals who began to work on themselves, they forgave themselves, and they began to work on themselves. They didn't feel sorry for themselves. They stood up and began to do everything that they could to make their situation better while they were incarcerated, so that when they were released from prison, that they would be able to add to whatever community they would go to. Now, I have to agree with Professor Muhammad that in some cases, when the person would come from prison of any particular faith, that they may have some problems being accepted in their religious community, which is really not right. I mean, especially if we can talk about what our books say about working with a person who is incarcerated, then when the person comes home, we should have something. I know that there have been many Christian organizations that have had halfway houses and transitional houses to support them. The Muslim community hasn't been so successful in getting those done. I believe that we do have some places here and there, but not as much as we should have. I know that there's a lot of money out there for people to have these kind of places intact so that individuals, when they come home, they can make that transition back to civilian life. But it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle. It's been a challenge. And I'm saying, as the professor said, that we should work on challenging ourselves to make that happen for them. Because of all people, we should not be people who hold their incarceration against them. We are the ones telling them that they should not let that thing define them. So if we're saying that when they come home, then we should be able to embrace them. And I happen to know in many cases that has been the case. I know inmates who are Muslim, who were embraced in the Islamic communities, and they're doing very well. Some of them have even risen to the occasion to become leaders of the communities. I know some Christians who have also been welcome in the communities, and now they are. I know one who is actually a bishop of his particular tradition. I know about 3 or 4 of them who are actually reverends or pastors of churches. So I know that it is happening. It's not all bad. It's not all bleak. Some of us recognize what the problems are. We're doing our very best, our level best to help to change things so that people will be able to make the transition and come back in. And there's some who may not do that, but it's not bleak, is what I'm saying, that all is not lost. So in recapping the points that I'm making, as a religious leader, as a chaplain, my responsibility was to go in there and help to put those broken bones back together so that that person would become whole again, using that holistic approach. Because again, I believe and actually know without a shadow of a doubt that that thing that they did is not them. I cringe sometimes when I would hear someone say that a 13-year-old was incorrigible. I'm saying to myself, how? They haven't even lived long enough to be incorrigible. But they put these things out there. And so as a chaplain, I have to say, no, the brother made a mistake. The young man, the young sister, they made a mistake. Don't hold that against them. I don't care how horrible it might be. You have all of these people talking about how old you actually are when you really get it together. So here's a person that's 13 or 14 or 15. No. They basically may have gotten involved with something in their community, but once they get with the right people, they are able to see where they may have made a mistake, and now they recognize that they can actually develop themselves to the extent that they no longer think that they are, the minority, or they no longer think that someone is going to look at them and look down on them. Again, our responsibility was always to make the person see themselves as being special, because they are special in God's eyes. So we would have our religious programming. I mean, in Fishkill Correctional Facility, every single night, there was some kind of religious programming. They had more churches coming into Fishkill. I mean, it was just so many. It was hard to get Muslims to come in. And I think that is a problem that we have to really work on, to get these masjids around the country to be sensitized to the extent that they know that, hey, these people are Muslims and they're going to be coming back out in your community. So why aren't you there helping them? Even here now, I'm living in North Carolina. I did some work in the female facility for a while, and I have to tell you, um, they're so backward in terms of how they treat the inmates. Especially when we talk about the Muslims, they don't want them to have anything, and you have individuals that's just really trying to support their particular faith and not doing what they should be doing, embracing all of them. So I know that in that situation, again, the females, they were striving and trying to get certain things and they couldn't get it. And they shouldn't have to struggle to get a chemo. They shouldn't have to struggle to get a Quran or get anything else. But if the religious person is not giving it to them, of course, it's going to be a struggle. So here we have all these Islamic communities, but we have nobody going in. Christians have a lot of people going in. Muslims, not so many. Yes. So that's something that we need to work on. Muslims, imams, if you're hearing this, or if you do hear it, get a community or a committee established, a prison committee established in your masjid, and then go to the local prisons in your area and work with those brothers and sisters who are incarcerated because they need the help. If you help them to see that they are part of the community, that they are part of your religious community, that will help them. That will help them go across, that bridge won't be divided. It won't be divided, it'll be open. They'll recognize that, yes, we are part of this. These people are accepting us. And then you might see a difference in how they behave when they come home and how they become taxpayers and how they become people who are productive in the community. This is so important. It is so important. And so I'm so thankful, again, that you allowed me to be a part of this. Chaplaincy, religion in prisons is absolutely important. Chaplaincy is important, but they have to have the right mindset, and religious liberty advocacy. If you're going to be working within the prison as a chaplain, then you should be there to advocate for those people who can't advocate for themselves, and not be afraid of the powers that be. Not be afraid of them, and speak truth to power. And in doing so, we can see things begin to develop, things begin to change. So I am personally involved with ending mass incarceration. And I hope and pray that we can get more and more people involved with this so that we can end it and bring our brothers and sisters home so they could be back with their families where they belong. So once again, thank you so much. And I thank Allah, and I ask Allah to continue to bless all of us and to keep us always doing that which is right. Ameen. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. And everyone, you can also give your virtual thanks. Thank you so much for that, for sharing your powerful experience, Imam Saluhaddin. And now we will transition to our final presentation with Professor James Sonne, who will be sharing as well the challenges of advocating for religious liberty in prisons. And welcome, Professor Sonne, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Guilherme. Thank you, fellow panelists and guests. It's a joy to be with you today. Indeed, it's a particular joy to be part of this interfaith gathering, focusing on this critical and timely topic. So much of the work that we do in our Stanford clinic, and I'll explain that in a little bit about what we actually do day to day. So much of what we do is in trying to elevate the central importance of religious liberty, as Imam Muhammad just pointed out, the universality of religious liberty, that it belongs to all human beings, and that its practice is a source of meaning and healing in the lives of people, and particularly for those incarcerated. As Dostoevsky once observed, the degree of civilization in a society can be judged by entering its prison gates. This is true today more than ever. So some quick background on my work and perspective at Stanford. I teach in the law and religion field and also serve as the faculty director of the law school's Religious Liberty Clinic. For those who aren't familiar, in a law clinic, we teach and train law students through supervised litigation in real cases for real clients. Much like you would in a medical residency, say, our goal is to teach our students how to become lawyers by being lawyers in the field under our supervision, of course. And for us, this work is exclusively in the religious liberty arena, a field of abiding importance, of course, since our nation's founding, but also one that has faced growing challenges in recent years, where the indifference or even hostility to religion that is growing elsewhere in contemporary society poses a special threat to a forgotten population that is yearning for the meaning, solace, and reconciliation that religion can uniquely offer to those incarcerated. As a bipartisan team of Senators Orrin Hatch and Ted Kennedy once stressed, in sponsoring together federal legislation to protect religious and practice over 20 years ago, quote, whether from indifference, ignorance, bigotry, or lack of resources, prisons restrict religious liberty in egregious and unnecessary ways. We just heard some examples of that. So whether as a matter of social justice, as a corporal work of mercy, or in our case, in the clinic, as a means of inculcating a human-first approach in the next generation of lawyers and leaders, we must respond. Rooted in this human-first approach to religious liberty, one of our chief areas of focus in our Stanford clinic is on prisoners' rights cases. Since our founding in 2012, we've represented all manner of believers and situations in that arena, including Native Americans who were longing to engage in sacred pipe rituals, Rastafarians seeking access to prayer oils, Muslims wanting to wear religious head coverings, Buddhists securing access to holy texts, even the Women's Prison Association. Professor Muhammad mentioned the special interest that women have and the unique interest that they have in access to religious liberty in prison. We filed a brief on that very point for the Supreme Court several years ago, and successfully, I might add. And we also are recently involved in a case involving a death row inmate in Alabama who's asking for a spiritual advisor to be by his side at the time of his execution. Very important case that recently the Supreme Court weighed in on in a positive way, and we're hoping to get a good resolution soon. Our work has made a difference, and not just in the lives of our clients, but ours as well, faculty and students alike, and we hope the wider public. There are two cases in particular that I'd like to talk about briefly that illustrate much of what we're exploring on this panel and that reveal what I see as the indispensable and abiding importance of religion in prison and its value in reconciliation, healing, and affirmation of the dignity of every human being, no matter the circumstance. Take, for example, the first case our clinic ever handled. It was for a Florida inmate serving a life term for a violent kidnapping. Our client was a Cuban immigrant whose Jewish parents did not have him circumcised at the time of his birth for fear of persecution by the Castro regime. Wanting to return to the faith and reform his life, our client asked to be circumcised. Despite the fact the client had obtained the support of a Jewish group to perform the Brit Milah procedure free of charge, the prison summarily denied our client's requests. So he called us for help. So how do you tackle the request of a once violent Cuban Jewish immigrant, fondly called the Jubin by his friends in prison, who wants to be circumcised by a New York mohel in a prison deep in the Florida Panhandle? Quite the set of facts. Well, our students began by flying to visit their imprisoned client, both to build rapport and develop facts to help solve the seemingly intractable problem. On their trip, the students learned their client's background, criminal history, religious reversion, and goals. There is no substitute for this one-on-one, deeply human connection. On returning to campus, the students then set about to tell our client's story, to frame the story to frame the case around a unifying theme, the redemption of a human being. Specifically, the students champion the importance of the ancient ritual of circumcision for a once troubled young man who's seeking to both atone for his wrongdoing and restore his life on a path of humility and righteousness. For our client, to be uncircumcised was to be forever separated from his God. This redemptive theory, in our case, also blended the policy of rehabilitated personal dignity underlying the operative law and the supposed rehabilitative goal of incarceration generally, with a universally accessible and relevant theme of covenant between a human being and something greater than themselves. Most importantly, the story was one the client wanted told, and the approach was successful as a practical matter. We settled the case, flew a Moyle in from Brooklyn to Florida, and our client is right with his God. The second story I want to share is that of a Messianic Jewish client who converted to that faith in prison to reconcile and amend his life. As part of that effort, our client sought access to kosher meals. Now, this case presented a series of unique challenges. For one, kosher meals are a desired thing in prison, so it's not uncommon for such requests to be frowned upon. Beyond that, however, was the even more fundamental problem of how Messianic Jews are often perceived. As those who consider themselves Jewish, but who also believe in the divinity of Christ, Messianic Jews are often in what one might call no man's land, where neither Jews nor Christians consider them fellow believers. And such was the case for the Jewish chaplain in charge of the kosher program at the prison, who denied our client access to kosher meals because, in his words, they were, quote, for Jews only. Now, as those committed to religious liberty for all, we didn't object to the chaplain's view as a personal matter. He's entitled to that view. But surely it couldn't be the last word in his service as an agent of the state in doling out access to a religious diet, which again was fundamental to our client's faith, so much so that he'd rather go hungry than violate it. Bottom line, we sued and successfully secured the meals for our client. But to my theme today of religion as a source of humanity and human dignity in prison, two quick things I'll never forget. The first was the in-court mediation. That's where you meet with the judge and try to settle the case. Once the lawyers assembled in the courtroom, our client was shuffled into court, led by two marshals in handcuffs and shackles, with a near empty sack lunch between his fingers. After all, he'd been trying to manage on the regular diet by eating only its otherwise kosher items. Then the judge appeared from chambers, descended the steps by the bench, and approached our client. The judge called our client by name, shook his hand, and wished him well. Our client began to weep quietly, sharing later how meaningful it was to have his humanity recognized and his name called. A small thing for sure, but it's resonated on my heart to this day. The second thing I'll always remember in the Messianic Jewish kosher meal case was the letter we got from our client after we ultimately secured for him the meals he was so desperately seeking. If I may, I'd like to read a short excerpt. Our client wrote, quote, "As I came back from my work assignment, I walk in my assigned cell and look at the bunk, and I see my kosher meal on that bunk. Each step you all helped me along the way, I'm humbled, honored, and grateful for. But it has taught me that there are people outside these walls that are kind, supportive, and willing to view me and people such as myself as human beings, who are willing to live up to the standards, principles, and integrity of growth, change, love, and redemption." Now, I tell these stories because at bottom, they are human stories. Yes, they occur under unique circumstances, amid competing interests, in the shadow of wrongs done, and the suffering that has resulted from those wrongs, to the victims and their families, as well as the inmate and those in his world too. But through our clinic work in cases like these, and the efforts of other clinics that have sprung up in our image, I would hope that in our own small way, we can witness the inalienable dignity of every human person and the importance of honoring that dignity in the darkest of times and circumstances. Thank you, and I look forward to the rest of our conversation.
Thank you for all our panelists and for your phenomenal presentations and bringing these topics to our attention. And I would like to maybe begin with a preliminary question for all our panelists that expresses some of the challenges that each of you raised in your presentations. And that is, how can religious institutions such as churches, synagogues, mosques, etc., contribute to alleviating the plight of mass incarceration, of working with lawyers or individuals that are in the public policy realm to bring about constructive solutions? So what are some first steps that they could take from your lived experiences and from what you've seen? And feel free to answer whoever wants to at the beginning.
If I could build off of a little bit of what Imam Muhammad was talking about and a little bit of what I mentioned at the start, is the universal nature of religious liberty, that at least from a lawyer's perspective, that's obviously in the law, that the law doesn't prefer one religious perspective over another, but it does value religion as a concept, as something that's deeply important to human beings. And obviously we have a rich tradition of many religions in this country, but the importance of recognizing at an individual level the ability to choose how to worship, and in what religious tradition that it belongs to every human being. As a friend of mine once put it, religious liberty is not about who God is; it's about who we are as human beings. And so recognizing that, and I think bringing that message that yes, there are invested groups, as the Imam pointed out, right? There are groups that are invested in various ways, but really showing that no, this is something that's important across the board, and to really elevate that collaboration among chaplaincies, among those who are involved in the prison, to really try to work together to bring these services, to bring this access to the population as a whole. Because yes, we care about the folks that are seeking this out, but what about those who are huddled in the corner that don't know about the healing power that religion can offer, the reconciliation that it can offer, all the good things waiting for you if you simply had the opportunity, or not. You can choose not to. Religious liberty belongs to those who don't believe. That's a choice as well, as Imam pointed out. But I think education and really showing that this is something that is valued and is important across the board is a good first step.
Professor, you can go.
I was going to say something about the importance of interfaith perspectives. Oftentimes, it seems as though those are hard decisions to make. Who should be the sole entity to enter into carceral spaces? And I think being able to have an understanding of global faith base is very important. So not just learning about the faiths of those individuals that are around you, but in other countries and other villages and other, places around where we may never meet an individual of that sort, but it triggers the mind to think and expand and accept in ways that we often don't include outside of the popular religions that we often always talk about. And so I think a good place to start would have individuals understand their own global knowledge of religion and faith-based and practices. And from there begin to build upon different worldly curriculums that we can utilize to bring readings in to those that are incarcerated, incorporated into the programs that we run for sociology, divinity, criminal justice, and any of those sort of educational endeavors. So I think starting with ourselves and then being able to replicate that and put it somewhere else.
Thank you. I think it's important as we start with ourselves to challenge our religious institutions to get involved. myself, going to the different masajid, the different mosques, and talking to the leadership and letting them know how important this is. And my Christian friends and Jewish friends doing the same. I like the idea of the interfaith piece because we're all in this together. Yeah, I mean, we all live in the same room, really. Everything that's going on in the world, we all see it. It's not like it's all divided up anymore. So I think that's important to get it out. We have to challenge them and I mean, let them know that, look, if this is what we say we're about, especially if you can go to your text, you go to the text and the text tells you certain things. So if you say this is what you're about, then you need to help about this ending mass incarceration, because we know there's a lot of other things involved. Why we see so many Black and brown people incarcerated for some little small things. But we also see what's going on in the world. We see what's going on in our country and how the people who have been doing some very outrageous things, some very terrible things have gotten away with it because of white privilege. So we have to begin to go into this thing and lay it out, let people see what it's about, let people see what's going on, and charge them to get involved with something like this and other programs that exist so that we can end this thing.
Thank you for those answers. And listening to each of your presentations, it reminded me as well about the value of religious literacy. I've never been incarcerated, hope not to be, but that's a theme that the value of religious literacy that really came out in all three of your presentations. And as a Seventh-day Adventist living in Brazil, I remember I would always face challenges trying to articulate to like a professor for an exemption on a Saturday exam or something of the sorts. And on that note, especially in the criminal justice system, what value have you seen in your experience or in your academic research that religious literacy, and by religious literacy for our audience, we mean the knowledge of other religions, as Professor Bahia Muhammad pointed out, how does that value of the other, of religious difference play in your work, whether in religion interfaith dialogue like Imam Salahuddin, whether in litigation like Professor James Sonne, or whether in public policy and in the academic setting like Professor Bahia Muhammad? I was wondering if you could all address that briefly.
I'd be happy to talk a little bit about it from our perspective in litigating these cases. I think, as I mentioned, I think religious liberty has its challenges across the board, and but in particular in prisons, I think we run up against this bureaucratic indifference, which is essentially the law is the law, rules are rules. There's no sort of appreciation for the human, for the human dimension, and obviously that goes hand in hand with the dehumanization of those incarcerated generally. So I think understanding that that's where many are coming from. In terms of rules or bureaucracy, I mean, I get that you need to have rules and you need to have security, and I think that just kind of ignore what the interest on the other side, so to speak, I think is not to be an effective advocate. You have to say, look, this is actually a good thing for all involved. It increases safety, increases mental health. It's a good thing. So I think educating just on the value of religion itself, that it's not just this legal right that we point to on a piece of paper and insist on, but no, it actually is a good thing. And then in terms of religious literacy generally, yes, sharing why this is something that's important matters. Again, just a right written on a page is helpful, but to be able to articulate why it is that our client needed a circumcision, which to many might seem odd and strange and awfully demanding, or why our client needed kosher meals. And there's a suspicion of inmates, right, that they're cheating the system or insincere or that sort of thing. And so it's really important, I think, to elevate the conversation, to show why this is important, to show that, established religions aren't the only ones, and to really engage the conversation at an educational level. And I think once educated, there can be great promise, but without it, it's just, it's oftentimes just words on a page and, not really affecting the lives of real human beings.
I would add to that by saying that religious literacy is everything. When you think about the first prisons that were created in my history of corrections courses that I teach, we talk about how the first facilities were brick and mortar, a window, and a Bible. Individuals were left to their cognizances to be able to spiritually uplift themselves and also deal with the punishment and shame of going outside of the confines of what your creator created you to do. And when we think about how far we've come as it relates to corrections and incarceration and going into the prison industrial complex, where we've gotten away from religious literacy and really looking more at financial literacy, how can we make more money off of the bodies of individuals that are there? It also meant the erasing of religion. Why? Because it is about contemplation. It is about slowly and steadily building and bonding that relationship with the higher being. And that happens through literacy. It happens being able to, read. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, early, we talk about how the voice came, read, and it was just like, I don't even know how to read. Where do I go from here? And what can I do? Just even holding the Quran, holding the Bible, holding the Torah, holding the powerful words in a book can transform the energy and spirit in one's body. And so when you talk about literacy, that's connecting the spirit to the word. And through those words, you can ultimately transform yourself, but an entire facility. And when you talk about carceral spaces, these are spaces without open windows. And so when you're talking about the liberation from being able to read it, feel it, and now speak it, it can now connect to individuals in ways that none of us would necessarily know. And it could transform in ways that in all of our scriptures, it has been identified, where individuals can go from being incarcerated to being the interpreter of dreams for kings and queens. And I mean, the stories continue to go on and how the powers of divinity live within these spaces and travel to these spaces to engage with individuals to help them become truly who they were created to be. When individuals are able to read that, it gives them the power to be able to speak it. And when you're able to speak it, then it means you're able to translate it, and others can translate it and take pieces of it. So it's a very, very important component. And I think it brings me back to the history of corrections, where it was just like, sit with this. And it was such a punishment to have to sit and to read and reflect that there was none of the draconian policies and rules and regulations that we see now. It was just like, you need to pray and pray and pray until you understand what you've done wrong and you know who to ask for forgiveness. And the judge was God, not an individual that, sat on, any sort of system structure. And so I think the replication of the differences we see in the creation of the criminal injustice system or the criminal legal system, we find that a lot of those components around religious literacy were erased. And if we bring them back, I think we will get closer to true reform and justice.
I wanted to add that the whole idea of the other, is put us in a situation where people just say they are those who are over there, the other. But from my read of scripture, and I'm talking about the Quran, there's a verse that says that God created us different. He created us different. And basically it's telling us that we were created to know each other, but we were created different on purpose so that we can get to know each other. And then it builds on top of each other, because now your knowledge base is expanded because you get to know something more about this particular one or something more about this particular one. And so now you embrace it all. Now I have a unique situation. And that situation is that the beginning of my life, I tell my story like, if anybody ever read the autobiography of Malcolm X and people raise their hands, I said that was my life too. Okay, so I've been through a lot that he went through. So in saying that, I went through that situation. I'm speaking from a person who sat where they sat or where they sit. So I know what it is to be incarcerated. But then I, by the grace of God, was able to come out of that situation. And I recognize myself as being like Joseph in terms of having all these keys now, going back into the prison. But the point I'm making is those men and women in the prison, and many of them who knew me from the past, and they were able to see this brother actually make it, that have come out of that situation. Criminal mind is gone. They know that it's possible because they see me as a living reality. I lived it. I'm doing it. I came from there. You can do it too, but this is what you have to do. And it has been very helpful. It's been very helpful because a lot of them, I'm telling you, and the part about the other is so important to me. When I did clinical pastoral education, one of the things that they said to us first was that when you go into the hospital, you're not going in there to proselytize. So don't come in there like you're evangelist, you're going to give them credit. No, you can't be in this program if that's what you're going to do. Because whatever that person is, that's what they are. And they should stay that way. If they want to change, they can do that when they get out, of course, if they get out. But you're there to serve them where they are. So that's what we believe in. We come in there. And so I've talked to these people, these men and these women who are not Muslims, but speaking to them about their dignity and their honor and the redemptive power. It's been so beautiful. So I see so many men and women who have broken the cycle of recidivism. And when they go back in, they're going back in as a guest to try to get somebody else to come out.
Thank you. Thank you for all those responses. And now I just want to transition to some points that each of you mentioned in your presentations. I wanted to ask Professor Bahia Mohammed, in what ways can chaplains and other religious professionals assist both individuals that are incarcerated, and this is an area that you've also done a lot of work with, their families? What can churches do to also help the families affected by an individual who is in a state of incarceration?
Thank you so much for that phenomenal question. I just recently completed a national study looking at children of incarcerated parents. And so when I think about the family, I'm oftentimes interviewing and engaging those individuals who are the youngest. And I would start by saying some of the things that can be implemented immediately during COVID-19 that doesn't take a lot of resources, because many individuals feel that the only way that they can help these families are writing grants, getting large grants, and being able to provide, large services, which we need to do simultaneously. But in the interim, I would argue that creating safe spaces, virtual church, virtual conversations and dialogues to allow for the incarcerated families to be able to talk. The session that we have today is phenomenal. And oftentimes these are conversations that are missing, specifically as it relates to Black and Brown communities. Oftentimes people look at the statistics on the disproportionate number of individuals who are Black that are incarcerated and make the ill assumption that there are conversations at the kitchen table about mass incarceration, that people are sharing their stories about incarceration. And in teaching at an HBCU and running programs where we center the voices of Black families, it is a conversation that is not had. Oftentimes, there are children prior to COVID that were visiting their incarcerated parents, and they were told that their parents were in school. They were told that their parents were away in boot camp. And I understand the code of silence that we talk about in the literature, and I understand the reasons why, because it's for protection. You know, if you know about this and you share it with the wrong person, the adults in the family who are considered the gatekeepers feel that the children will be ostracized and discriminated against and forgotten about and not given an equal opportunity. And they're absolutely right. But one of the things that I challenge individuals to do is to focus on success and resilience. Focus on the whole picture. We're never supposed to look at one side. Specifically in Islam, we believe in balance. And so if you talk about balance, yes, there are effects of mass incarceration, but what about those stories of success and resilience like we've heard on this panel today? Individuals that not only survived, but also thrived and are now reaching their hands back and providing service to the community. So much so that there are children all across the nation with various different faith perspectives and beliefs that are not having their simple questions answered. There are children all around the world that are having nightmares about what's going on with their absentee parent, what's going on with their sibling, be it a brother or a sister, an aunt or an uncle, or even a neighbor and a loved one, that they're wondering what is happening to them and nobody's talking about it. But when you turn on Disney and you turn on all the blockbuster shows and the video games that are the most popular, like Roblox and Fortnite, they have scenes of incarceration. They have correctional officers. If you think about a lot of the movies like Sing, where the children are watching, and there's an entire ape in an orange uniform. They're talking about incarceration in the media in child-friendly ways that are introducing children to incarceration, that they're living it in their families and not having the conversation. In churches, masjids, synagogues, and in any religious space, we should be having real conversations with children who are able to gain an understanding of what it's like. We should bring in our grandparents and be able to pray over them, be able to make du'as for them, provide them resources, and give them a break. Many of the Black grandmothers that I interviewed were raising 4 generations of children without ever having an opportunity to go and get a manicure or a pedicure. These are women that wake up every morning with their Bible, reading and praying for reprieve and for help and for support. And as a Muslim ummah and as a faith-based community, we must be able to uphold that. When we think about the children whose mothers and fathers are incarcerated, these are considered orphans in my eyes. Islamically, the ummah is responsible for stepping up to care for orphans. Where is the Muslim population when this happens? Where are our faith leaders across the band when this happens? Lastly, I would say having interfaith dialogue, it just never fails. We need to open up our churches and our masjids, not only for those individuals that believe and practice in the way that we do. We are not going to be able to do this alone. We see strides in some faiths, we see less strides in others, but individuals have that framework. We need to begin to talk to each other, and I think it starts with our own households. We can't step up and be the imams and be the faith leaders that step in front of populations and don't share our own narratives of incarceration and also liberate those within our own family and then go to the community and then go to the nation. So something as simple as just sharing our truth and using our voice and our 2 ears that we've all been blessed with to be able to listen, to be able to come up with viable solutions for allowing individuals to alleviate that pain and also give them the opportunity to dream again. Because the collateral consequences of incarceration are those that have done nothing but are connected to the people that are incarcerated. So they love them and they should not be punished for that.
Thank you so much for that response. And now transitioning to Professor Sonne's presentation. And 2 points I would want to ask on, and perhaps he can elaborate a little bit more on. What are some of the challenges that religious inmates face in obtaining religious accommodations? I know you mentioned some, but just wondering if you could mention some more. And can religious institutions do anything to help lawyers with their task? If so, what? What can they do?
Sure, good question. And we talked about some of this already, but I think there are a variety of challenges that inmates face. Access to chaplaincy is one. I mentioned that in the sort of acute setting of the death penalty, but that's certainly, access to chaplaincy services, access to the ability to have group worship, particularly an issue now. It's an issue, I guess, in every place in the country in the COVID era, but obviously a challenge in the prison setting where if we think it's difficult for folks to gather in the free world, then all the more, in prison settings where I would argue that it's all the more important that happen, not less. So there's certainly that issue. There's access to written texts. There's access to various religious items. Certainly meals is an issue. And a variety of other challenges that face inmates. And as I said, it depends on the jurisdiction. Some jurisdictions are good. They take a engaged approach that is equal yet open, and encourages the religious liberty of inmates. There's the sort of opposite end of the spectrum, which is, well, we're treating everyone the same. We're not giving anyone anything, and obviously that's the worst. And then most jurisdictions are sort of hit and miss, and it ends up being that they favor one religion or another, not necessarily intentionally. I mean, sometimes it's just sort of their own experience, and so that's where religious literacy and education comes into play. So it really is, I think, so much about elevating the story of inmates, showing that this really can be a win-win thing where it is a situation where it's good for society. I happen to think that it's good for the human being no matter what, but in terms of what we're offering, in terms of protecting religious liberty and the ability to exercise that part of humanity in the way that one's conscience demands. But regardless, it also has a functional benefit as well. And Professor Muhammad mentioned this in terms of just the origins of the penitential system, right? That there's this recognition of restoration, reconciliation, and healing. What can faith communities do to support lawyers in this work? I think obviously building up literacy and telling those stories so that there is something to draw from, that it doesn't seem like it's just convenient or something that just trying to gum up the works, that it really is, an authentic need that inmates have, and it's something that should be honored and protected. I think also being there, as Imam Muhammad pointed out, in terms of the chaplaincy, having a greater effort at engaging and being available for chaplaincy, not just for the paid chaplaincy, but also voluntary. A lot of times, the path that took folks to prison chaplaincy is a mixed bag. Sometimes it's the beautiful story that Imam shared, right, about this personal investment and wanting to give back and wanting to lead others. Sometimes it's, well, I guess I'll do that. And, I just sort of come from a corrections background where there's not really a sensitivity. It's just a job. And I think that can be unfortunate. And we face this sometimes. We have really good chaplains we work with, and others that, really are just, correctional officers with a collar. And again, I think even in that too, I think pointing to, and I think Imam Muhammad was pointing to this a little bit, also recognizing the role of correctional officers, and that they're, they have a tough job, and there's a lot of secondary trauma and other things that are happening. I don't think maybe a few went into this line of work because they wanted to be tough guys. But for the most part, the correctional officers we work with, they're trying to do the right thing. And, they're just sort of in a world where, if you watch the Stanford Prison Project, where it's a dehumanizing world, it affects everyone. And so I think trying to minister to them too. And I think try and capture the humanity across the board is a good thing.
Thank you also for that answer. Imam, Salahuddin, you've answered the question in your previous response, which was what role can chaplains play in rehabilitating individuals to reenter society. So I think we can transition to our Q&A, which is very short because we're short on time. And I'm going to combine some of the questions for the sake of time. Faith Nico asks, what role does religion play in the ways the U.S. approaches criminal justice? And also there's another question here that says, what are one to three, we can just do one, sacred text or book, article, documentary, or other study materials that each of the panelists, including the moderator, would recommend for helping the audience to think about these issues? And whoever wants can begin. And the first question was, what role does religion play in the ways the U.S. approaches criminal justice? Just repeating that for those who.
That first question is a tricky one because it's, to ask academics that question. It's, I feel a little bit out of my depth because I feel like I need to know so much more. I mean, in terms of the concepts of crime and punishment, they have religious origins, but yet then they, in trying to find sort of the least common denominator approach, I think we've opted for a more we've grown into a more black and white kind of rules are rules approach, and I think that probably started with some religious concepts that were good, but over time, I think we've lost sight of the origin story of a lot of that. But I'm not an expert in that dimension, so I don't know if my fellow panelists are, but. I tell law students never to resist the question and change the hypothetical, but I fear that I may be doing that.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. In our police law and society and also history of corrections, we talk about the separation of the state and religion. And so, there are some components there where oftentimes when religion comes to play as a research methodology, it is operationalized in ways that doesn't allow for the nuances of the faith to emerge, but more so looking at it from an objective perspective, which oftentimes I think pushes it out of the realm because it is argued to make researchers too objective, that they are not able to separate between kind of the findings and the nuances of what it is that they're studying. We do have in some of our classes the sociology of religion, and oftentimes it gives an opportunity to engage in ways that the information that we talk about in criminal justice, and oftentimes the names that are used in a criminological framework, come from a religious base, but not bringing the wholeness and the nuances of what it fully means and almost redefining it in a kind of weird, kind of warped way that we don't get an opportunity to talk about. So I think it is a great question. I'm not able to answer it directly, but indirectly, bits and pieces of the criminological lens allows us to look in at, restorative justice and being able to look at liberation through the lens of education, which incorporates components of religion and faith-based and those understandings. And then also under the realm of wellness. I would like to see us be more straightforward and marry the two again, where they were, divorced from the state and religion. Wondering what that looks like now with the new administration, where we see that religion has played itself on the front pages of a lot of what we're dealing with as it relates to the Jewish faith, as well as it relates to the Christian faith. And so I think it means something different now, and it is a question that may take on a new era in the leadership that we currently have, which we won't know of as of yet.
I wanted to just mention that a lot of what we see in terms of what's in corrections now, it came as a result of litigation. It was litigated, and when they litigated it, then it became a mandate to have it. And before that time, they did certain things. But I do know that as far as even with the Islamic faith, there was a lot of litigation that took place that caused them to recognize al-Islam as a bona fide religion. Incarcerated people did that. Before it actually was recognized outside, it was recognized inside the prison as a bona fide religion. So I see the government as going according to whatever the script says, going according to whatever the law says, so they make sure that they provide it. And they provide it because it's mandated. I used to say that the only reason why we are there is because we've been mandated to be there as chaplains. If we weren't mandated to be there, we wouldn't be there, because they don't like that. Because it seems like we kind of mess things up a little bit. Because here we have, and I remember what you just said, Dr. Sonne, but they have this thing, almost like in the military, where if you're going after somebody and you're fighting someone, you have to dehumanize them so you can go and do your thing. So the correction officers look down on the inmates to make it seem like they're different from them. And so I had a superintendent that would tell everyone that came into work, he would tell them that the only difference between them and you is that they got caught. They didn't like that, but he was trying to let them know that we were all the same, really. But they wanted to feel like they were different. And so they would call them the scum of the earth, this, that, and the other, and try to make them feel bad. So here's a chaplain. The chaplain is coming in saying, no, you're dignified. No, you're honorable. Stand up. Don't look down. Stand up. Put your head up. So that cuts across how they're looking at it, you see. So because it's mandated, because the government says you have to have this, they allow it to happen. If the government didn't say it was okay, it wouldn't happen.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your responses. And if we can conclude, just say one book title that our listeners and our viewers can go research, that can supplement the information and the issues that we've talked about here. I can start. My book recommendation for the audience is Religion and Prison, an Overview of Contemporary Europe by Julia Martinet.
I would say The Condemnation of Blackness, Race, Crime, and the Making of Modern Urban America by Dr. Khalil Jibril Muhammad.
I sanction that. I second that.
Just as a general religious liberty title, and I think it applies in what we're talking about, I recommend The Right to Be Wrong by Kevin Hassan.
Perfect. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, panelists, for taking your time to be here with us. We sincerely and truly appreciate the work that you've put into this and sharing and enlightening us more about the issue of religion and prisons. See you next time. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to be on the panel with you. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam rahmatullahi barakatuh.